At 4:40. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right. Recording. Welcome to the Seabrook School Board meeting at 4:40 p.m. on September 22nd. I begin this meeting with a checklist to ensure meetings are compliant with the right to know law during the state of emergency. As chair of the Seabrook School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the Seabrook School Board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 646-876-9923 and webinar ID 921-8150-4829, or by clicking on the following website address: https://zoom.us/1-921-8150-4829. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom or telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the website of the SEU 21 office at www.seu21.org. If anyone has a problem, please call 603-926-8992 extension 103 or email revans@seu21.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please know that all votes that are taken during this meeting should be done by roll call vote. Let's start our meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Rhonda?
Jennifer Hubbard.
Here with family.
Jessica Brown.
Home with family.
Forrest Carter. Kelly Huber.
Driving alone.
And Mike Rabideau.
Home with one person.
All right. I have the roll call taken.
Thank you very much. Get this. Oh, here we go. All right. We've completed the roll call and call to order. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you will all please stand. Let's start with that. Pledge of allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, to the republic indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Oh. Okay. Get the roll call. All right. The first item is public comment on the agenda items. If there's anybody that would like to make a public comment, please raise their hand through Zoom and Rhonda will introduce you.
We do have 7 people in the audience for this meeting.
Okay.
As of right now, I do not see anybody using the raise their hand feature in order to be heard.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on. We will approve the meeting minutes, the previous board meeting, which was September.
Sorry, Mike. August 11th.
August 11th is a regular board meeting. I'm sorry. So there've been so many meetings. I'll take that motion if possible.
I'll make the motion that we approve the minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. I have a motion and a second. If there's no comment, Rhonda, would you please take the vote?
Jennifer Hubbard.
Yes.
Jessica Brown.
Yes.
Kelly Huber.
Yes.
and Mike Rabideau.
Yes,
I have that vote recorded.
thank you. The next one is the finance report for Seabrook School Board. Matt?
Good evening. So I've included two reports for this month's board meeting. The first of which is the year-to-date 2020-2021 expenditure report, which there really is no significant variance from last month. The second report is the year-end summary from 2019-20, and I would like to go a little more in detail in regard to this report. The first area I'd like to speak about is the unreserved fund balance. So the unreserved fund balance is the amount of money that at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, we have essentially left over, so our remaining balance that's returned to the town to help offset tax assessment. This is primarily determined via two sources, the first of which is unexpended funds out of the operating budget, and the second is unanticipated or revenue surplus on the revenue side. So we receive revenue via federal funds, state funds, any donations, those type of vehicles. And then there are other smaller sources, such as unexpended warrant articles. So if an approved warrant article, for example, a roof project was executed and the actual cost came in lower than what the warrant article amount was, then that balance would be included in the unreserved fund balance. Other sources include unpaid carryover encumbrances. So that would be an instance where if we ended the fiscal year, so June 30th, but had an outstanding contract for some type of service that went into the next fiscal year, and then we didn't expend all of those funds, then that balance would also be included in the unreserved fund balance. So as of June 30th of 2020, there was an unreserved fund balance of $221,644. Those funds will be returned to the town to offset the 2020-2021 assessment for our community members for residential taxes. I included some of the larger drivers for this balance. It included just over $185,000 in unexpended funds. This was a byproduct of COVID-19 and moving to a remote remote environment for the last 3 months of the last third of the school year. So we saw significant savings in areas such as transportation. You see, $114,000 unexpended. Our other accounts included regular education of over $135,000. So that encompasses, substitute costs, salaries, supplies, equipment. Our buildings saw savings of almost $94,000. So those areas were, somewhat obvious. We weren't heating the building as much as necessary without people in the building, as well as electricity, our custodial staffing, supplies, etc. And we also saw, $43,000 in savings from employee benefits. So if you recall, as we were going through the school year, we were concerned about some of our expenditures leading up to COVID-19. We had a significant overage in special education, over $400,000. We still saw an overage for special education, but due to the last third of the year going remote, we saved significantly for special education transportation, and professional services, some of our tuition costs. So that number actually came down. So we were only over by $267,000. In addition to the unexpended funds, we had some revenue surpluses of almost $139,000. This included additional special education aid from the state. We received some refunds from Primex, our insurer for unemployment and workers' comp, as well as liability. That was due to COVID-19. When you see a decrease in claims, that resulted in lower costs. So that was reflected in a refund back to the school districts. On that note, I will also mention that we do anticipate a refund from Health Trust for our medical insurance, our health insurance. That will likely be finalized in October, and that will be fairly significant. Across the entire SAU, it's close to $300,000 that will be returned, of which, Seabrook is probably, close to $100,000 of that or more. Our Medicaid, we saw a Medicaid increase of $68,000. This is artificially high. As you recall, there were some significant concerns about whether we would receive Medicaid funding and reimbursement based on some changes at the state level. However, we were able to kind of work around some of those issues, and we ended up receiving a fair amount of that Medicaid funds. But when we reported our estimates to the Department of Revenue, we estimated based on the fact that we did not anticipate receiving as much of that Medicaid fund. So this surplus is due to those state the difficulties that we encountered initially with the state. The last item for the revenue surplus that I'll note is that I have FEMA included with a surplus or FEMA reimbursement of just over $12,000. All school districts nationwide were instructed that they were eligible to receive FEMA reimbursement. FEMA conducted trainings for us. We went through the entire process. We submitted claims to be reimbursed. And last week, the federal government notified us that schools are no longer eligible for FEMA reimbursement. So we had reported to Department of Revenue that based on the preliminary approval of FEMA funds of $12,500. However, that will not be coming back to us. So that $221,000 unreserved fund balance will slightly decrease to, just about $210,000. This is a disappointment in regard to this reimbursement. They had promised us 75% for all PPE, cleaning and disinfecting supplies, COVID-related expenses that were not specific to instructional practice. So you couldn't get reimbursed for like computers or teachers or those type of reimbursements. I also want to note that Winnacunnet is also returning a significant amount of funds to the towns. They had an unreserved fund balance of just over $1.2 million. We really took the tact that any funds that could be saved via going into the remote environment should be returned to our towns. And Seabrook will be receiving approximately $393,000 via the Winnacunnet unreserved fund balance. So that's significantly higher than previous years. Typically, Winnacunnet returns $500,000 or $600,000, so it's double what we typically return to the towns. Based on current economic and really macroeconomic conditions, we know that our communities are suffering. We know families are suffering, so we want to make sure that we did our part in returning funds and to try to maintain or decrease any sort of tax to our residents. The next item I want to discuss is expendable trust fund.
Matt, can I stop you 1 second? If you
Certainly.
don't mind?
Yes.
The insurance payback from the employees' insurance fund, you're saying that we'll probably get, give or take, about close to $100,000 for Seabrook? I mean, guessing out of the 300?
Correct. So that's going to be, and again, this isn't finalized yet. It's just initial discussions with Health Trust, but
Right.
this will, they will be finalizing this in October, and it will hit this fiscal year, so 2020, 2021.
Okay, so we'll probably return close to 300,000 then. Is that correct?
No, so this
Oh, it's
is
not
for,
added?
this is for fiscal year 2019,
Got it.
20.
Got it. Okay.
The refund from Health Trust will go towards the fiscal year 2020, 2021. So it's more of a timing issue.
Got
You know, we couldn't, not knowing the amount, we couldn't report that to the Department of Revenue. If we had a concrete number, we could potentially, we could have contributed that to last year's unreserved fund balance, but it's just, I mean, you saw what happened with FEMA. You know, we
Right.
don't want, we want to make sure we have a locked in number before we finalize anything.
But the second thing is, I'd like to thank you and your staff for all the diligence in doing the planning on this, because obviously we came out with a great number, and it had to do with all the time that you spend doing the projections, because we really don't know a lot of times ahead of time. And we're just, the board, looking at it from a number crunching standpoint and trying to save money. But in this case, you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, well, the credit really goes to the building leadership, the principals and directors. So Stephanie and Aaron really did a fantastic job managing the finances at the building level. Like I said, initially we were facing a potential withdrawal
That's it.
from the Special
Right.
Education Expendable Trust. So this is a real win that we were able to return some funds to the town. So
Matt, I'm sorry. I see Jessica's got her hand raised. I don't know if she's wanting to say something or if it was raised on accident. Jessica?
No, I just have a question for Matt regarding the fund balance that's being returned from Winnicott to the towns. Just curious what the other towns are getting in the district back, and what the formula was for you to give back the money to the schools.
Certainly. So it's based on each town's allocation. So there's a formula. So as you know, when the budget is created for Winnicott, each town is responsible for a certain percentage, and that's based on student enrollment and property valuation. Seabrook is roughly, I want to say 33, 34%. So that same percentage is returned to the town when there is any unreserved fund balance. So like I said, Seabrook is 393,000. Northampton will be receiving 187,000. Hampton Falls 76,000, and Hampton is 556,000. So in regard to the expendable trust funds, we have two funds. One is special education with a balance of $306,251. That target is at $400,000. I will note that at the March ballot, the community did approve funding $50,000 for this trust. So that 306 includes that $50,000, as well as $75,000 for the building maintenance expendable trust. That building maintenance expendable trust is at $229,000. The target is $200,000. So I just want to point out that we're over target, but we, as you recall, we were planning on utilizing funds for the replacement lockers in the middle school, and that will be done in October. Those funds will be withdrawn. So that's $55,000 that will be reduced from that 229. So that will fall under that target amount. We typically, if we're for some reason go over the target, we make an effort to try to utilize those funds in which and try to lower operating fund costs, either via budgeting or in the current budget. I'll also note that we did utilize just under $10,000 this previous fiscal year for building repairs out of that expendable trust. Lastly, in regard to the expendable trusts, that $50,000 and $75,000 that were contributed to those trusts, those have already been taken out of the unreserved fund balance. So it was an additional. So if we had not funded those two trusts, it would be an additional $125,000 in the unreserved fund balance. So that 221 is what will be returned. In addition to expendable trusts that are put out for warrant article, we do have raised and appropriated warrant articles, and there were two that were approved in the March of 2019 ballot that were utilized in this fiscal year, the 2019-2020 school year. That included the teacher's contract, so the C collective bargaining agreement, which was $277,000, as well as a elementary school roof replacement at $113,000. We did carry over encumbrances of just over $7,600 from the 2019-20 general fund into the 2020-2021 school year. And finally, the school nutrition program, has been operating on all cylinders. Our school nutrition director, Abigail Kaplan, has just done a great job managing that program. And we ended the year with a surplus of $32,606, which is really a testament to the hard work that she's done in a particularly challenging school year where we had to, kind of work on the fly to come up with a new way to feed our kids via pickup locations, delivery of meals to homes. It's incredible. I mean, food insecurity is a major issue when it comes to education, and she really did everything in her power and successfully to ensure that our Seabrook students were well fed, were not hungry, and were able to learn. And we were able to continue that through the summer, and we're continuing it into this fall. We did receive some waivers to provide free meals for all students through December 31st of this year. So she's really, on top of that, and I'm just really excited about the work that the school nutrition department's been doing. So finally, as part of the fiscal year end, we do have our auditors come in that we contract independently. That's Plodzik and Sanderson. We did receive two very minor control recommendations as part of the fiscal year end close. The first of which was that our policies are outdated and need to be reviewed and updated. As you know, we did convene, we identified that as an issue, and we did convene an SAU-wide policy committee in 2019. And we have been hard at work of updating all those policies. There are hundreds of policies, so we're still working on it. But and it is an iterative, it's an ongoing process as new laws come up and new regulations. We need to align our policies with new regulations and laws. So that's something that's really important work that we, as you know, we have a board representative from each board work on at the SAU level, and we are making some great progress. The second recommendation is, was that we had a number 4 Title I teachers who signed a stipend agreement for some summer work. However, we are required as part of the Title I program to have them sign off after the services are rendered. So going forward, what we're going to do is We'll have them sign that work agreement for the summer, but then we'll pay them out via special payment, and that way we'll ensure that they sign off on their payment after those services are rendered. And that is it for 2019-2020 fiscal school year or fiscal year. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Nobody has any questions? All right. I guess we'll carry on. Let's see. Again, Dr. Lupini, am I on? Okay. Update on the return to school, please.
Yeah, so let me make a couple comments and then turn this over to Stephanie and Aaron and David as well. And I particularly want to emphasize here, not that any one of those is more important than the others, but something that David has said to a couple of boards this month, that we created a school, an online remote academy in a week and a half. And I don't think that, I think we need to continue to sort of focus in on that we were able to do that. And that with Cindy Fagan's help and others, we were able to get that up off the ground. So I want David to say a word about that in addition to what's going on in your two buildings, because that also entails a number of your students. I want to talk about two things. First is the situation from last week, and I'm not going to get into any more detail than people have probably read in the newspaper, but I just wanted to say to the board what a really great job that Stephanie did in handling and working with DHHS, and her school nurse, and your middle school nurse was involved as well, and us and the transportation company and all of those kinds of things in really being able to focus in on what the specifics of the issue were that was in front of us, right? You've seen this happen a number of times in districts throughout the southeast part of the state. Most of them have resulted in schools being closed down for a week, 2 weeks, longer. In fairness to those schools, some of those are high schools, which are a much more difficult situation in terms of contact tracing and those kinds of issues. But I just want to say that, that Stephanie did a great job of working with me and working with many, many others to make sure that people were informed, to make sure that the situation was handled, to make sure that we addressed the needs of the right number of students, and a class and a bus without having to close down the school. So I just want to kudos to her for her efforts, her and her team and their efforts on that. And second of all, since I can share the screen, I just want to say that the end of last week, we did put out the return to school matrix, which we intend, and there it is, which we intend to begin to publish on each of our districts and schools starting next week. I want to be really clear with people on this. It's these 5 areas in particular that are in bold, that are the key areas that we're paying attention to. And it should not surprise anyone that the focus, for example, for your middle school, for Winnicott High School, for Northampton middle grades, is going to be in the staff absentee and leave area, right? And in this availability of space area. So these 2 indicators, we tried to be very transparent from the beginning that it was not any kind of community spread that kept those schools from opening. It would not have been a red mark up here in this area or in these areas about COVID, but it's really what we've come to refer to as these COVID-related areas of the laws around staff leaves, and this area around having a certain number of kids as a maximum in classrooms, which is much smaller than the number we would normally operate with, which makes us spread out, that are the areas. I can tell you at Northampton, for example, Northampton's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are not in person right now because of the amount of space that it took to bring K to 5 in. We essentially had to cannibalize the classrooms that normally would have been used for 6th through 8th grade, many of them, in order to be able to bring in the number of 5th graders. 5th graders K through 5. So I think, when people see this, I'll tell you right now, because I don't think many of those things have changed. Many people who've paid attention to this know that the FFCRA law goes through December. And so those leaves are going to continue until December if they're not extended by the federal government. And right now we have no indication that suggests that it will. And so people who expect us to be able to get schools reopened prior to those kind of timelines, I'm afraid right now, given the factors that sit in front of us, are going to be disappointed. But we made a pledge to report on this every 2 weeks. We're going to start that on October 1st. We're going to be very public and very transparent about it and put it out there with some narrative so that people can see the kinds of factors that we're up against in terms of bringing all of our kids back to school. So with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions before I turn this over to, I should stop sharing. Before I turn this over to Stephanie, Aaron, and David. And Kelly, I see you have a question. If that's okay, Mike, I'll take that question.
Is it okay? Okay. So it's safe to say that the situation with the space and the staffing may not change until December. So
it's a good question. Let me say that there's an effort on the part of some of the Southeastern superintendents, Southeastern region, to try to access some funding from the state level for childcare, which would give us another strategy to offer to our teachers that would help get some of those people that are on leave back quicker. So short of those kinds of measures, unless things change in some districts, and you and I had this conversation, right? What we're seeing in many districts is actually districts going in the other direction right now, closing, going to remote. So it would be very hard for us right now in at least 2 of my schools. It would be a little dishonest for me to say that we have a clear path to reopening given the number of teachers who are on leaves.
So I want to just point something out, and I'm pretty sure that you'll agree with me and everyone else that we didn't, as a board and as administration, focus on elementary school only. We did the best we could to get the whole entire school back as much as we could. So there wasn't a focus on, okay, well, let's get the elementary back and the middle school can go remote. We all fought as hard as we could to get all the students back in the best ability that we could, correct?
That's true. I use the example of Northampton, and your situation is very different than Northampton. We did not have to cannibalize my word, the word I used earlier, spaces, and therefore that wasn't something that got in the way necessarily of the middle school. It's very much, and again, since we're publishing this next week, I'll say that it's very much, as I talked to Aaron, that was only yesterday, right, Aaron? It's very much an ability to staff those classrooms issue right now. That's correct.
Can we keep trying, though, obviously, to focus on maybe trying to get because I know,
we are. And it's going to come down to what kind of strategies can we offer? What kind of strategies are we able to offer? Like the focus, and it's really my colleague in Sanborn who's been the lead on this. Are there monies out there that would allow us to create or access childcare programs that would alleviate the issues that a number of our staff members have with being able to come to work? And
excellent. Because I do know that there are some middle school kids that are struggling. I know that, it's been mentioned, but I also do know that Aaron, from what I've heard, has been very accommodating, very understanding, has tried to, finagle so that kids can get it. So I have heard that. And I do want to say, that makes you feel a lot better. But I do think that, as you know, that it would be just as important to get the middle school back if we can.
We entirely agree.
Yeah.
We entirely agree.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. So Stephanie, Aaron, and then David, I don't know what order you want to go in, but I'm going to turn this over to you.
I'll let Aaron go first because they're vacuuming right outside my office. So. Okay, I can go. I'm not going to promise dogs aren't going to bark, but I'll try my best to keep them quiet. So yes, we've been busy. We are running a different schedule as we've talked about, and have actually spent some time working the schedule, and we even made a change. So hopefully parents aren't feeling too frustrated with our schedule. We changed the times a little bit. We recognized that people needed some breaks in between classes, and we adjusted that and adjusted lunch a little bit. We're feeling really good about having a schedule and having kids working hard in classes all day long. We've had some positive feedback from parents, which has been great, who are saying it's going much better than it did in the spring. So I'm overall pleased to report that I think the scenario we're in right now is much better than the spring. We hoped it would be. We certainly had faith it would be, but we're seeing a much better attendance rate. Kids are much more engaged. Teachers have been amazing. They're being creative. They're trying their best to make great connections with students through computer screens, and I'm just seeing a lot of great things happening. So I'm pleased with how it's going so far. Of course, we absolutely want to get kids in. We do have some kids coming in that need to be in for a variety of reasons, and I'm working with parents who are expressing that their students are struggling. And we'll bring in as many kids as we can safely and have the ability to bring in. So, we have limits with transportation and limits with numbers of students and adults and supervision. So we're working hard to continue to keep the building safe, but bring in kids that we can. And just continuing to evaluate what the programming looks like and what giving staff lots of professional development and lots of ideas and programs that they can be using to be creative with the students. The teachers are getting excited about, the science team just came to us and said they want to use this program that's really great with virtual labs and hands-on experiences in the virtual world. So just some real exciting and creative things coming out and coming from our teachers who are working hard. And I'm going to be honest, they're struggling. They're struggling not seeing students every day, but they're going, supporting each other and just putting in even extra efforts to work with kids and help kids. And the schedule that we've created gives them extra time. Our class blocks are longer. I know we reviewed that in the summer, but just for people to review again, they have 3 now 80-minute class blocks a day, which gives teachers some time to do the instruction, but also work individually in small groups with students. So we're seeing that has been good and helpful. And we've been working through tech issues. I would say our tech department's been amazing. We've had some Chromebooks that are on the older side, and Chromebooks are a great tool, but they do break and have issues. So parents have come in and swapped them out, and our tech department's gotten working ones in the kids' hands really quickly, so they're not missing instruction due to technology issues. So also, again, we have hotspots for people with internet issues, so we've been working hard. Maria Easton has been really instrumental in getting those into the hands of families struggling with internet. I know, Matt, you mentioned Abigail Kaplan and the cafeteria food service, but they're working really hard to make sure that kids are still eating. So I feel very proud to be able to report just all of the hard work that's happening and a lot of the successes that are happening so far. And we were only a couple weeks into it. So while we all feel exhausted by all the work, it's positive work and it's great work for our students and our families. So I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to you, your staff, and the administration, because I'm sure you are working harder now than you ever have. And I just want to say thank you for all your efforts, and thank you for continuing to push forward to get these kids into school and to give them education. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. You're absolutely welcome. We're pleased to be able to do it.
All right, I'll go next. Thank you, Bill, for your comments earlier regarding the stuff that we worked through last week. I thank Bill for his support throughout all of that. We were both in constant contact with DHHS working through all that, and it was great to learn how the system works, and it proved how our system is working here, that the cohort model that we're using is really working and keeping our students in school and safe. So I think all in all, we had a great start to the school year. We, I think, kind of over prepared in some areas, and some things we just had to get up and going. You know, we kept on saying we could use 3 more weeks, but at the same time, like, it's good to just get up and started. So we had a great staff, just everybody, all hands on deck. We were, you know, anticipating that morning drop-off and afternoon pickup might be challenges, but it went really smoothly. And so the public, the students, the parents were all great. We thought we'd have to be reminding people on masks and things like that, but everybody was really great with the social distancing, with the masks and all the protocols and all the changes in our routines in terms of the entry and exit. And the students have been great, and everybody was just excited to be here. So that's great. And we're excited for the Remote Learning Academy students too, that model is working for them and that they're getting some great support there. We've been, you know, trying to maximize our space and getting people to, you know, best areas for the social distancing, and we've been getting out students outside as much as possible. Kudos to our Unified Arts team, because they've been bringing kids out as much as possible and getting them to get some fresh air and move around. So it's been great to have them out there. We had built in a lot of extra time into our morning schedule for social emotional learning, knowing that students, it's a big adjustment for them coming back, and also wanting to spend a lot of time with those connections with the classroom teachers. And so we have almost the full hour, first hour of the school day that we've devoted to that time for now, and we will kind of tighten up and adjust our schedule as we move forward, but we are kind of prioritizing those needs of the students and the staff for that bonding time. And kudos to all our teachers for everything they did, and, you know, preparing for both possible models to be remote or in person. And they've done a wonderful job at making any adjustments that they need. And our EAs, we've assigned almost an additional person to almost every classroom, so that we have some built-in consistency and support for the students, and so that we have a built-in, if someone needs to be out or somebody has a meeting, we're not sticking a new person in with that cohort. We have another person there normally. So that model has been working, and it put some people in slightly different roles than they were used to, and everybody's been very flexible and made that commitment to the students. So thank you to all of them. Just, you know, basically I can say all the work of the task force came to fruition, and all that planning, I look at other principals and other SAUs and some of the struggles they've had, and I think we prevented a lot of possible challenges with all that work that we started in the spring. So thank you to the SAU staff and the task force for all that they did. Matt and Aaron already mentioned the meals program, which has been amazing. And we had EAs, you know, I had one EA who kept on texting me, I'm going by your house because I'm riding on the Winnicott bus, dropping off meals. And just everybody willing to help out. I think, as Caroline said before, she put out a new schedule and it would just fill up in minutes. Everybody was willing to pitch in. And the custodial staff, as we kind of went through all the changes, they've been great, you know, kind of rechecking rooms and working with rooms in terms of spacing and making sure that we're compliant with everything. And with the Remote Learning Academy, Cindy and Dave have been a wonderful resource in terms of getting that started and making those connections with our school. Curriculum-wise, we've had a lot of the remote teachers come in here and collaborate with our teams of teachers. So that's been fabulous to make sure that we're all aligned and doing some of the same work and have the same supports. We just had meetings earlier this week in terms of connecting our Title I resources and all of that to Remote Learning Academy. So we're making all those connections and making it as seamless as possible. And so all the students are getting the same services, and we're you know, keeping tabs on everybody and what their needs are. And the online piece, I would say that's been something that we've been really trying to focus on as a staff, is trying to maintain that online instruction piece in case we have to go pivot to remote, or if we have students that are absent, we want to be able to have students access curriculum materials. So our teachers are trying to build their lessons and supports as much as possible in an online format. So for instance, the class and bus that had to go remote, obviously for the class, the teacher could teach remote, but for the students that were on the bus, that was scattered throughout multiple classes. And the teachers jumped right on, created videos personalized to some of the kids, and gave them tutorials on how to access some of that asynchronous non-live instruction so that they could stay right on track with us. And the teachers have done a really great job on providing that and troubleshooting some of the technology. As Aaron said, our tech department has been overtapped at this point with all the requests, but they just keep on keeping on and working, day and night and weekends and stuff too to help us out. So thank you guys for your support in keeping us here. And we continue, obviously, I couldn't do this without my admin team. Mark and Jessica and Lauren have been critical to all this. So thank you to them. And Aaron and I continue to collaborate to make sure that we're working on our end of the building to make sure that whatever we're doing would allow for the middle school to enter if they can. So we're trying to keep to our space and all of that so that that doesn't become an issue. So thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Amazing job, Stephanie, with everything that you've been through this last week and all the hard work that you and your staff is doing to keep these kids. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your continued support, guys.
All right, so Remote Learning Academy, right? I know face-to-face is probably the big show here. But we, as Bill said, I get to celebrate people tonight. We were asked to kind of do the impossible in a week and a half. And I just have to give kudos to the teachers. I see one of them in the audience tonight. The administrators, Stephanie, thank you. Cindy Fagan, thank you for just all this work putting together the Remote Learning Academy. We are in, believe it or not, in our second week of class, although it feels longer, and I'll just make that a testament to a lot of the work we've done. And we have 9 teachers, K through 4, just so you guys know the architecture. Think of K through 4 as its own ecosystem, its own school, basically. And then the 5th grade, Seabrook Middle School, is inheriting from across the SAU, all the 5th graders virtually. And then 6th through 8 are being split off. Lincoln Ackerman's going to Northampton, and Southampton's going to Seabrook Middle. So we really did kind of develop a comprehensive system, K through 8, for Remote Learning Academy. I'll just go through some highlights. First was just kind of startup, right? Just like everybody else, we had to worry about opening logistics, devices, making sure all our Google domains worked, making sure all the kids had emails and credentials and all parents had emails, all that kind of stuff. We did run an orientation schedule for a week, which was really helpful. And I think it not only gave teachers time to get to know the kids, but also gave our teachers time to meet together to start planning on how they were going to deliver. So I think that paid off huge dividends for us. And now we're kind of in the throes of understanding what it really means to run a school virtually. We're looking at accountability measures like taking attendance across 4 districts. How does that work? What does it look like? How does it play into state reporting? All the things that you don't want to think about, but you kind of have to. We're talking about curriculum, and as Stephanie said, our teachers are meeting in pairs and in grade level teams pretty much constantly. We are pegging our curriculum K through 4 on Seabrook's curriculum, so those students, when and if they do come back face to face, they won't have missed a beat. We're getting a lot of those curriculum resources, actual materials, books, manipulatives, workbooks, those kind of things for our kids to make sure that they're up to speed with everybody else. We worked really hard with Northampton, actually providing unified arts across the board for our kids. They have weekly choice boards where they're able to participate in library, technology, physical education, all the specials that they would expect at the elementary level. And as several of us have mentioned, right now we're looking at student supports and making sure that our special ed students are taken care of, making sure we have the IEPs communicated, 504s communicated, and Stephanie, as Stephanie said, we're looking at Title over the course of this week, and I'm sure that's going to be moving forward. And yeah, I guess I'll finish by just giving a thank you to the tech directors as well. This is something that nobody expected could be done across all 4 districts. And they've just been working day and night to make sure not only the hardware works, like the devices, but also all the little stuff like passwords work, and that families aren't freaking out when they're doing their morning meetings. So they've done it, and they've done it with a smile. So I'll say thank you. We've got a long ways to go, but we've made incredible strides for remote learning. Thanks.
Hey, David, one comment I have, I've had a few parents come up to me within the last week or so and said, basically, remote learning is nothing like it was this past spring. They are so much happier. The kids are happier, and you guys put a lot of work into this, and I thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The schedule makes a huge difference. As a dad of 3 who are all remote learners up here in Dover, I can sympathize and understand with the parents' need to have that schedule and those supports, and we're doing our best to make it happen.
Thanks again. Dr. Lupini, do you have anything else to add?
No, that's our report. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? We're good? All right, moving on to policies, the first read. I'm on the policy committee, and I've read all of these. So the bottom line is it's a tedious task, but a requirement that, as Matt pointed out, we've definitely have had to have done. And I think that we're basically through the bulk of the mandated ones. And now we'll start to progress into those that may be a little more specific to the districts, or to the districts, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's largely the case, Mike. Unfortunately, the legislature keeps moving
Right.
the ball on us.
Right.
And so there are a number of policies. We only began this committee 2 years ago, and there are a number of policies that we did in those initial sessions that we've already had to revisit, and that we now have to revisit again because the legislature makes changes. The other one we'll be dealing with is a pretty substantial change to the Title IX policy. That'll be coming up. But you're right. These policies were looked at by the policy committee in the spring. They are largely what Matt referred to earlier in those. They're largely those financial policies. This is a first read, which means there's no action necessary. Correct. If you have questions tonight on any of these policies, or you have questions between now and October, where we'll take these up at a joint board meeting, because they do apply to all the districts, please feel free to ask them either tonight or just get a hold of one of us, probably Matt on most of these, in the interim between now and October, and we'll be happy to try to answer those questions for you.
Great. Thank you. All right. I guess we don't need to go to non-public for personnel.
We have no need for a non-public this evening.
Correct. Great. And I guess the next thing is to highlight the different meetings coming up. The SEU 21 Ops Committee meeting is on Tuesday, October 6th at 5:30 p.m., which will be on Zoom. And also the school board regular meeting for Seabrook will be Tuesday, October 13th at 4:30 p.m. And then there will be a joint board meeting on Tuesday, October 20th at 6 p.m., also on Zoom. And I believe we're on to the retreat.
We are ready to do that, Rhonda. I believe we have, I see both Barrett and Will are here, and we can bring them in. Will Phillips and Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Boards Association will be joining us tonight to take you through some work on board administration roles and responsibilities. We're very, very lucky to have them. They've devoted a lot of time to our SAU over the last couple of weeks. Hi, Barrett. Thanks for being here.
Barrett.
I will. They are really amazing support for us administratively, I want to say, and for our boards, and we're really lucky to these two people in New Hampshire to work with us. So Barrett, Will, I'll turn it over to you. Mike, unless you want to make any other comments, or Rhonda, there's something else we need to do logistically.
I think we're all set. Do the principals need to stay for the retreat? I wasn't sure if
They are more than welcome, but certainly they may have other things that they
Right.
need to engage in this evening.
Before the principals
It's
sign
Erin's
off,
birthday, so she's got to go.
if I could interrupt real quickly though, before the principals sign off, Stephanie, it's been a number of years. It's nice to see you.
I know.
again.
Nice to meet you too.
Happy birthday, Erin.
Thank you.
Ooh,
I'll
happy
stay on for a
birthday.
little bit.
I tried to do that discreetly, Erin.
That's all right.
Nice. Bill, I have a question. We're recording the retreat?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, just make sure. Thank you.
All right, I'll take the excuse. Bye, everyone. Fun.
Enjoy your celebration.
Thank you.
I guess Barrett and Will, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, members of the Seabrook School Board. Appreciate the opportunity to come and present to your retreat tonight. Again, I'm Barrett Christina. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire School Boards Association, joined by Will Phillips, NHSBA staff attorney. Want to thank the board for inviting us to this meeting and for hanging on to yet another Zoom for another maybe 45 minutes or an hour or so tonight. I think Rhonda was able to provide you with a couple of different handouts. One about roles and responsibilities. I'm not sure if we passed along the right to know along. If you did, if not, that's fine, because I don't think that was really on the agenda tonight. And I think Rhonda, in a couple seconds, you'll have a PowerPoint to pop on up for
Yes.
us. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what? I did something and I have it up here that I need to get rid of.
Sure thing. Take your time.
Okay.
So the format for tonight, we're going to be talking about sort of roles and responsibilities, just a refresher of what, pertinent statutes and laws and best practice say about the school board's role and school district operations, and then compare and contrast that with the administrative role in sort of the operations of the school district, and more importantly, finding where those two meet, right? Finding where that medium is between sort of law and statute and practice and operations within your own local school district. This is intended to be pretty informal. I'm going to go through some of the slides. Hopefully we can just have a conversation as we're moving along. Certainly questions are welcome from the board. So in whatever way that we're going to do that, I guess raise your hand or whatever it might be. But and see, Rhonda's getting the PowerPoint moving. Fantastic. What I think is, and I'm just gonna, are there any questions before, if that's okay? I'm gonna just jump right in.
All
Sounds
yours.
good. I don't see any questions popping up, so I'll just jump right in. And Rhonda, are you in control of the slides? Do I have control of those, or just you?
You know what?
Doesn't
How
matter.
about I would be happy to give it to you, because
Okay.
every time I do it with my two screens, it's popping to a different screen.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop sharing this.
Barrett, if you want me to do it because you're doing most of the talking, either way.
Okay.
works.
Yeah, that's Rhonda. Do you want to give Will those permissions then?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Glad to do it.
Thank you.
This time I'll try to pay attention and follow along, Barrett.
All right, no problem.
Okay. So I think that I just gave you permission to do that, Will.
If you did, I don't.
Do you have it up on your?
Do you need the PowerPoint, Will?
I have the PowerPoint.
I think if you open it up and then share screen. Thank you for everybody's patience. No two Zoom meetings are alike. Is that a fair statement?
So do you see I have it up on my screen, two different screens.
So on
Not
the
yet.
bottom of the Zoom, you need to go to share screen. Do you have the little green button that allows you to share?
Hold on, let me get out of the. Okay, so go to the bottom of the share screen. There we go.
There you go.
And I have to share screen. I'm going to share screen 2.
Mhm.
Share it.
There we go.
So now you have it?
Yep. Thank you, Will.
Okay, you're welcome.
Fantastic. All righty. So to the materials and to the slides. Thank you again for everybody's patience. The first page, and you've got that handout. I'm certainly not going to go through this, word for word or line by line, but I guess, and I'm sorry, probably should have asked. What do we have? About 45 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes. How much time do we have allocated? You're north of that, Bill? Okay.
Yeah.
An hour, 45 to an hour is fine.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I just like to know that so I can just keep track of where we are on the slides and whatnot. The first page of the handout, and I think we've got it there on the slide too, Will, if you want to click on to the next one. One of the two basic themes from, I guess maybe three basic themes from this presentation are getting school board members to understand and recognize the difference between governance versus management. The recognizing that the board has to act under collective authority and not specific authority. And then 3, as we talked about, identifying what those roles are within the school district for both the school board and the administration as well too. One line that NHSBA likes to use as we're going through these trainings is that it's the school board's role not to run the schools. Excuse me. It's the role of the school board to not run the schools, but rather to see that the schools are run well. And we'll talk a little bit in a few more slides about how the board exercises its proper oversight and proper governance of the superintendent in order to make that happen. So with that, there's also the notion we talked about, the difference between governance and management. Governance is the 30,000-foot view. Management is sort of the day-to-day operations of the school district. And having a clear understanding of these differences can help accomplish positive student outcomes. Another simple way to put it is that the board sets the vision and the goals for the district. And those goals and the visions are implemented, if you will, by the administration. It's the administration's responsibility to do what the board asked it to do, whether or not that's through policies, whether or not that's through strategic planning, goal setting, things of that nature. And I think that the difference and interplay between governance and management is demonstrated when we compare and contrast the Department of Education rules. For those on the board or that you may not be familiar with the Department of Education rules, when you see ED in front of a series of numbers, that stands for Department of Education, New Hampshire Department of Education rule. And curiously, there is a rule that speaks directly to the role and responsibilities of school boards. And that rule is Department of Education Rule 303. And in order to highlight the difference between governance and management, we like to compare and contrast the rules of the school board under the Department of Education rules for school boards, and compare and contrast those with the Department of Education rules that speak to the role and responsibility of the superintendent. So for example, 303.01A that we have there on the slide, school boards shall adopt policies necessary and desirable to control and effectuate the recruitment, employment, evaluation, and dismissal of teachers and other employees. Which sounds like your employment related policies, right? And I heard that as I was listening into the meeting before our portion started, that the board has a policy review process. You've got a policy committee. You work through a certain number of policies every month, if you will. You bring them forward to the board. Fantastic. That's the way it should be working. But the highlight again, the board adopts these policies relative to the employment. Compare and contrast that with a couple different Department of Education rules relative to the superintendent's responsibility. Excuse me. 30 ED 302, those are the responsibilities of the superintendent. The superintendent shall nominate all certified staff and appoint other employees in accordance with state law, rules of the state board, and here's the kicker, and school board policies. So the simple lesson, if you will, that NHSBA tries to impart, and this is just one example, the board adopts policies, the superintendent implements those policies as the board has written them. Another important aspect relative to the superintendent's responsibility is that the superintendent is responsible for directing and supervising the work of all employees of the district or districts within the SAU, and have all powers necessary to make such direction effective. Sort of old language, but that's basically saying that if we read these three rules in concert, superintendent, the school board is responsible for these policies and is responsible for the oversight of the superintendent, correct? The superintendent then is responsible for the oversight, evaluation, recruitment, so on and so forth of district employees, consistent with school board policy. And obviously there are some other considerations, collective bargaining agreements, things of that nature, but if we look at I'm sorry, that's just on page 2 of the handout. If you look at a couple other, if you do have the handout in front of you though, and well, that's fine, you can stay on this slide. If you do have that handout in front of you though, we have a couple other examples sort of towards the middle bottom of that, where we list out 3 Department of Education rules where they all talk about the school board adopting a policy, and more than anything, you're probably, hopefully you become familiar with your policy handbook, the policies required by law, as it was mentioned a few minutes ago. There's a Department of Education Rule 306, which is referred to as the minimum standards for public school approval. All the things that every public school in the state has to do to become an approved public school by the Department of Education. Embedded within that is a list of about 26 policies that school boards are obligated to have, required by law to have these policies. And also, as Dr. Lapini mentioned, the legislature keeps sort of moving the goalposts for us when it comes to policies. Every year, there are more and more policy requirements coming down from the New Hampshire legislature. When I started at NHSBA about 15 years ago, I think we were at about 50 policies required by law. And now we're up to, well, I don't know, we're north of 75 at this point, aren't we?
Yeah, it's 75, and then you add to the fact that some of those actually, you might have a federal regulation, especially that you're only required to have the one policy, but that requires 35 to 50 elements of the policy. Your fiscal management policies, your Title IX policy, your new one that you haven't gotten to yet apparently. Those all have just a tremendous amount of the required elements. And Barrett, we do have several slides on policy as the first responsibility in a little while.
Okay, thank you. Continuing on though, I guess with collective authority of the school board, this gets back to the real basic governance and sort of interweaves some right to know law aspects, if you will, in addition to that. As I think you all know, the school board can only act as a collective body acting upon the will of the majority members. And where does that have to happen? It has to happen at a duly called meeting, right? No individual school board member has any inherent authority or any greater rights to act on behalf of the board unless that board member has been given those rights. And how they're given that rights? Again, usually through policy. For example, you may have a policy that gives the board chair certain authority to set the agenda, to be the spokesperson for the board, whatever the case may be. Now, obviously, in that sense, the board has delegated individual authority to a certain board member. But again, you've done that through the collective process with a majority of the board there acting, discussing, deliberating as a single entity, as a unit at a duly called meeting. All right. Key roles of the school board. This is, again, the handout, page 2. I included this in our general roles and responsibilities training a few years ago because I don't want this, given everything that's going on with public education, whether or not, especially in New Hampshire, whether or not it's COVID related, the school funding issues, whatever's coming out of the legislature, be mindful that at the end of the day, it falls on local school boards to provide a public education to the children within your district. And that statute, RSA 189:1, states that it shall be the duty of the school board to provide at district expense elementary and secondary education to all pupils who reside in the district, so on and so forth. So just be mindful of that. You know, we're getting into budget season now. We've had significant challenges under COVID for all students, really. But and there's the language of the statute. But your job as a board is to provide an education to the children that reside in Seabrook and are attending your schools. Continuing on, another key responsibility of school boards, I think we've talked about this, policy, set and establish policy. Why is policy so important? Well, it expresses the guidelines and philosophical statements of how your district is going to operate. It creates the framework for the superintendent to manage the district and the staff discharge their assigned duties. Boards also adopt policies and advise staff of the school community of legal requirements. And more than anything, we talk about this within the school community, within sort of the people inside the building. Who else does policy help give guidance and a roadmap to? Teachers, staff, parents, students, right? You've got sections of policies on students, members of the public, if they want to speak at a public meeting, if they've got a concern or a question or a complaint that they want to bring to the board. We've got policies that speak to sort of chain of communication, if you will, and chain of command. And, you know, from a more practical level, you know, as Will and I are both attorneys, if you were to call us with a question about something that's going on within the district, 9 times out of 10, what do you think the first question Will and I are going to ask? What does your policy say? Or do you have a policy on that? Or have you looked at your policy? But more than anything, I mean, policy is the manner in which the board governs the district, right? I mean, they're the rules of the school district. It's like you get to write your own you get to write your own legislation, if you will, your own rules, your own methods of which you want to see things operate within the school district. And then moving on, as I mentioned, Department of Education Rule 306.04, 26 different policies that are required through that. There's federal uniform grant guidance policies. We've got over 70 policies required by law. Excuse me. And the policy list grows every year. There were 5 new policies alone last year. If you could go back another slide, Will, I just want to draw attention to, I'm not going to make everybody sort of flip back and forth between their handout right now, but if you have the handout, take a look at page 2. So we talked about some of the school board responsibilities. And then if you jump over to page 7 of your handout, it starts speaking to the superintendent's responsibilities under the Department of Education rules and pertinent statutes. And you can see that they're related. As we talked about with that one policy and those 2 Department of Education rules, maybe on like the 2nd or 3rd slide, school board adopts employment-related policies, superintendent implements those employment-related policies. You can compare and contrast a whole list of required policies and then responsibilities found in either statute, Department of Education rules for superintendents, and how they can compare to one another and how they're interrelated to one another.
Barrett, if I could just interrupt real quick. The handout that he's referring to, it is in board docs for all of the board members. It was part of your agenda. So it is in there if anybody is curious as to where that's at and if they're wondering where it's, where it's at and where you can find it.
Thank you, Rhonda.
You're welcome.
I'm all set, Will.
Okay, so next, the first responsibility that we always preach is policies. And, there's a little bit of a transition here because the next board responsibility under statute is the preparation of the budget. And then ancillary to that is fiscal oversight. But, I like to describe budget as being, the fiscal expression of your policy. Earlier Barrett talked about, one of the main purposes of policies is to express the board's goals, objectives, mission of the school district, and a budget is how you can bring life to those goals and objectives. And just like when you manage your own household, sometimes your hopes and your dreams and your wishes don't really align with what's fiscally appropriate for your household. And so there's always a give and take. So you do have the duty under RSA Chapter 32 and various school rules such as, statutes, RSA 197 and RSA 198 to provide an annual budget. Let me ask, does Seabrook have a municipal budget committee? Yes, okay. So it's a little bit different when you have the municipal budget committee. Still, even though the budget committee prepares the budget that's presented to the voters, the school board is still charged with preparing a complete budget for the district. There are some districts that kind of let it slide because they figure, well, it's not our budget anyway. But let me just say that there are various reasons to do it and do it as thoroughly as if it was your budget that was before the voters. First of all, it makes it easier for you to justify, the expenses that the district is asking for from the taxpayers. And if you've done your homework, then the budget committee, and I can't speak for your budget committee because I know it's not universally true, but generally the stronger a case you've made for your own budget, the more cooperation you get from the budget committee. And then take that one step further. If for some reason you're at odds with your budget committee and they don't support a program that the board feels is important, being able to spell out very clearly where those differences in the budget are at your annual meeting, again, will make it easier for you to perhaps push forward a goal or an objective, a program that the board feels is important. But if you haven't done the homework with the budget, it's impossible for you to make a compelling case to first your budget committee, then your voters. We don't spend a lot of time. There are references in the handout that you have. I think it's probably somewhere around pages 4 and 5. Let's see, it's on page 3. But because it's such a statutory process and it really differs district to district, depending on whether you're SB2, whether you have a municipal budget committee, those things, we don't spend a lot of time on the statutory provisions. However, there are a few other pieces that school districts sometimes, school boards, not even school districts, school boards wonder, well, if we're not allowed to go into the SAU and start, telling the employees, here's what I want, you to provide me and those kinds of things, because again, it's the superintendent that has the authority to direct and supervise the employees. But how is it you provide fiscal oversight, for the district, which is, one of your responsibilities? And you do that through a couple of mechanisms, two statutory, and then one just in your general relationship with the administration. And the first one is through the approval of transfers of appropriations. So you prepare your budget and it's really just guesstimates. It's done a year and a half plus, before you're actually making some of those expenditures or receiving some of those revenues. I'm sorry. And, so it's all guesswork and the number of snowstorms you actually get as opposed to the number that you plan for. And then you take into consideration, the number of roofs of the athletic field sheds that collapse that you didn't expect. Those are all things that you often can't plan for. You can do your best guess and you put that in the budget. And then as the year goes on, you have to move money from your snow plowing line over to your Chromebook line last year, for instance. And when you do that, you're required to make a transfer of an appropriation. There's a statutory process for that. And NHSBA has a sample policy that lays out the process for that. The statutory obligation is that the board approve it. The policy that our sample policy allows for the administration to make transfers up to a certain dollar amount. Most districts have adopted something similar to our policy, but many districts have different dollar amounts. Some I've seen as high, actually I've seen one that exceeds 25,000. So if the transfer of appropriation is less than 25,000, the superintendent doesn't go to the board. The board has given pre-approval for that. But then I've seen other districts where it's as low as 5,000 or even lower than that. There's a few districts that require all transfers to go through the board. So that's a place where the board gets to exercise some discretion about how it's going to deal with those transfers. You can see how the money that the district is spending is matching up with the budget that you set the year, the several months or year before. So that's one. And then the next one is something that you have to do, if not every week, close to it, and that's the manifest approval. And again, there's flexibility under the statute as to how boards handle manifest approval. Generally, the treasurer is approving payments only after the board has approved it, but the statute allows a subcommittee of 2 people, 2 board members, to do manifest review. So some districts have the 2-person manifest review all year long, and the board just sees the report. Other districts have the full board reviews every manifest, and then there's a hybrid where many districts have full board do it throughout the year, but then during the summer they go to the 2-person just to make sure that you have the number of people that you need. So those are all places, those are 2 places where the board has statutory not only authority, but responsibility to provide fiscal oversight for the administration. And then lastly is in the relationship with the superintendent. Barrett will get to, evaluating the superintendent, but, your expectations throughout the year, not just the budget, not just the manifest review, not just the transfers, you're getting reports every month, you're expressing, your sort of opinions and requirements as the year goes on. So it is an ongoing process, but that is how, generally how boards can perform fiscal oversight under limited statutes. Anybody have any questions on that before we go to the next role? Okay.
Any questions about anything? No? Great, thank you. All righty, continuing on, what else do the pertinent New Hampshire laws say about the role and responsibility of school boards? Hire and evaluate a superintendent. Now, obviously, I joke around that hiring the superintendent, that should be the one aspect of roles and responsibilities that you do least often. And I know that fortunately in SAU 21, you've been able to have a number of years where you've had superintendents in the position for a number of years. And I also, but coextensive with that, and when we're talking about board governance and board oversight of the district or the SAU, it comes down to the superintendent's evaluation, doesn't it? And I won't spend a lot of time on this. We did a similar workshop just earlier was that Monday last week, earlier this week for Northampton? The days are all the same, right?
Last week.
And so I know that you've got the SAU 21 has implemented a superintendent evaluation process. So I won't spend a lot of time on that, but that's really where that's how you exercise your oversight of your superintendent, of your employee, right? Through your evaluation. The same way that the principals are evaluating teachers and the superintendent is evaluating principals and central office staff, the school board has an obligation to provide an annual evaluation to the superintendent. And that's not just a best practice, it's actually a matter of law. There's another Department of Education rule there that says you have to annually evaluate the superintendent. On what would be another source of law, getting back to policy, you probably have a policy that says you'll annually evaluate the superintendent. And last, more than anything, I haven't seen Bill's contract specifically, but every superintendent contract I've ever seen has a provision that basically either mirrors the Department of Education rule or has a statement that you'll be conducting an evaluation of the superintendent on an annual basis.
So the next, just get them all up at once. The next role that a school board has under various statutes is the responsibility to perform or conduct various hearings. In almost all other actions that the board engages in, it's doing so under what's called a legislative capacity or a legislative function. You're making rules and decisions that govern the entire district. But there are times when school boards are called to act as a judge and jury over a matter involving individual interests or individual rights. And when you're doing that, you're acting in what's called the quasi-judicial capacity. So you're acting as judge and jury. Examples of that are, for students, you have expulsion or long-term suspension. You have manifest hardship cases, which, by the way, the statute just changed, so you'll be getting yet another policy update. Sorry about that, can't help it. And I think that one we've updated twice in the last 5 years, but each time it was because we were told to do so by the legislature. And for employees, you have dismissal, non-renewal, labor grievances. There can also be, each of those examples are found in statutes. Statutes require these things. Labor grievances are derivative through your collective bargaining agreement, but the collective bargaining statute does require that you have a workable grievance process, and generally that's going to include at some level a board hearing. I think I saw recently a collective bargaining agreement in the state where there was no board review, but that's not common at all. There are some school board policies. I don't know that we might have a couple of them that have a right to a board hearing that's created by policy as opposed to statute. I think we might have one in an optional policy for early kindergarten enrollment, and then it might be one in if a community member objects to books in your library or something. But those are not mandated hearings. Those are just hearings that you decide that you want the board to be the final say. But next, a couple of other things. So you're acting as the judge and the jury, and when we think about judge and jury, we're talking about due process. And in our society, we've got a couple of expectations when it comes to due process. And one is that you have a fair and non-biased decision maker, so the judge. And the other thing, and the jury. I mean, the jury's deciding the facts and the judge is applying rules of law. But the second thing is that if my right to go to school is being taken away, I get to hear the evidence that's introduced, that's being used against me. I get to challenge the testimony that's being used against me. And so, a couple of things here. Both of those notions are compelling reasons why, in addition to the fact that it's the superintendent's job to manage the schools, but they're compelling reasons why school board members, especially when the complaint concerns a student or an individual employee, school board members really have to take a hands-off approach. You don't have to you're not required to meet the same juror standard. In other words, you have to have, almost no information about the case. Your school board members in a small community, obviously you're going to know some things. But what it does mean is you are not an investigator. When you get that call from the parent complaining about, what Bobby did in the 3rd grade class, you're referring that to the superintendent. And you need enough information only to refer that to the superintendent. And then you're also at the same time providing the parent with the path that they need to follow in order to, properly get that complaint resolved. And if not resolved, have their rights preserved so that when they get to you as a school board member, you don't have to recuse yourself because you were too involved in the fact gathering and so forth. There's a couple of other steps in there that don't have to be completely in the dark. Anyway, and one of the things, one of the, having done many of these types of hearings over, a course of 25 years, even in those cases where you're really not going to be conflicted out, I guarantee you if there's an attorney on the other side, whether it's a union attorney or a student's attorney, they're going to raise that as an issue. And next thing you know, you're spending money on an attorney to fight about whether your school board member should stay on the hearing. And instead of, focusing those limited resources on the substance of the issue. So there's just really, in addition, you have this responsibility, you have the responsibility to provide due process. And it underscores the difference between management and governance when you're talking about individual student or employee matters. Before I go on, did anybody have any questions about that? No. Okay. Next one, collective bargaining. You guys are one of a kind because I'm happy that my practice of school law was almost entirely in the western part of the state, and I never had to encounter the situation where each district had to approve a single contract. The fact that you get any of them passed is a miracle. So anyway, so collective bargaining, the school board is the representative of the district in collective bargaining. It is deemed the party to the collective bargaining agreement when you sign that agreement. And of course, collective bargaining unit in New Hampshire is the other word for union. You have the responsibility under law to negotiate in good faith. You can request the union to negotiate, or they can request for you to negotiate. There obviously is in most districts this year some twists. They're called impact bargaining. I don't spend a lot of time on that, but generally speaking, to sum it up, if the employer makes unilateral changes to the terms and conditions of employment, then the employees have the right to demand, and the employer has the responsibility to negotiate the impact of those unilateral changes on employment and on the terms and conditions of employment. So you might have heard over the past couple of months, MOA, MOU, impact bargaining. Those are all related. We would say that the union has overreached in what topics are required to be impact bargaining, but there are several things that do impact their working conditions. So trying to sort those out is, that's up for your labor attorneys and your, the negotiating team. But whether you're talking about impact bargaining or, the normal cycle of bargaining, which is usually kicking into gear right now, I think the unions have been a little better at getting them started earlier. When I first started doing collective bargaining, you might not get a demand to bargain until, mid-October. But then by the time I was done 20 years later, we were getting the requests in the spring. So, I don't know how it works in 21, but you get the demand for bargain. It's the union, the board then creates a negotiating team. And this is probably one of the most interesting points about the team. We haven't talked about it tonight, but one of the things that you all know is that to a large extent, you do not lose your rights of expression as an individual just because you got elected to the school board. You may be restricted in some ways when you're at a board meeting, but outside of the board meeting, you still have your right to express yourself as an individual. Collective bargaining may be one of the only places where that's not entirely true. If you are on the bargaining team and you bargain a tentative agreement, you have to advocate for the passage of that agreement. So you can't walk out of there and say, yeah, I only did it just to get out of the meeting. But I don't think you should vote for it. And that's true whether you're talking to the rest of the school board at a ratification meeting. Hello, new person. Whether you're talking to the school board at a ratification meeting, or you're talking to the voters at the annual meeting. In either of those cases, if you're on the team, you have to advocate for that contract. So what does that mean to the rest of the board? Just be careful who you put on the team. Have some, think about it. Some boards want to have the opposing viewpoints, and I'm all for that. But if you've got a 4-to-1 majority, and that one person is just complete disagreement with the other 4, and you put that person on the negotiating team, that's a one-person veto right there. Because that person, either that or the person has to agree that they are going to support whatever comes out of that agreement. And I had a couple of situations where maybe that wasn't the case, and it gets to be very sticky. The board's in an awkward place, the negotiating team's in an awkward place. So anyway, just give some thought to it, and just remember that that is one place where you might lose your right to express yourself. The other place is if something happens in non-public session, it stays in there, except for the meeting minutes that come out. Okay, I think I covered all the points. So Barrett, moving on. Here we go.
Moving on. Thank you, Will. The last couple of primary roles and responsibilities we want to speak about that fall under the board's purview is communicating with the public. Now, we're obviously aware of the right to know law obligations, that the meeting is noticed and open to the public, and we take minutes and public comments and things of that nature. But it goes beyond that. When we do the new school board member orientation, usually in person at our office in Concord, when we get 80, 100, 120 new school board members, I like to look out around the room and ask why people ran for the school board. And one of the prevailing reasons that I've heard over the years is that people want more communication from the school board, or better communication from the school board, or never felt that the school board was doing, important things and engaging in important initiatives. And there wasn't that communication to the public. So, we're in the age of information, right? Everybody's got a device, everybody's got, can text, can Facebook, can email from their hand. So finding new ways to communicate with your public and to, and enhance public access is something that NHSBA certainly encourages. And you might want to look at, I know everybody's in the middle of everything crazy right now, so I'm not saying that, not telling the board or Bill to take on a new initiative right now. But look at developing a communication plan, and also look for NHSBA, look for an email from us, if not later this week, probably maybe on Monday. Our operations manager, Amanda Hodgman, has scoured the internet the last couple of weeks and has found a handful of communication plans that are in place in New Hampshire and other districts in SAU. So we've compiled that. We're going to be sending that out. We certainly recommend that the board do what they can to engage the public to the extent possible. Don't have to tell them, excuse me, every time a bus is running late, but whether or not that's a monthly update from the school board, or a monthly update from the superintendent, or, a joint type of letter, These are the primary things we talked about at the 2 meetings this month. These are what we're going to be talking about at the meeting next month. We'll be mindful that, you know, there's a public event going on for our high school seniors, or the musical, or whatever the case may be. And with social media these days, I don't know if Seabrook has a social media presence, but it's easy. You have to want to have a policy and some procedures in place about who's going to be managing and who has access to the, you know, the password to Twitter, and who has authority to post and things of that nature. But be mindful that the public wants to hear from you. And when I say public, you know, we think of obviously parents and students. It goes beyond that, doesn't it? I mean, think of all the different constituencies you have in town. You've got taxpayer, you know, association groups. You've got elderly people on fixed incomes. You've got business communities. You've got students and parents and just general taxpayers who may not have kids in the school district. You've got teachers. So you've got a lot of different constituencies, each of whom want to hear what's going on within your school community.
Barry, can I add just a little bit?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to touch on the right to know law.
Yeah.
You've got a push and a pull here. You know, on the one hand, we've got these wonders of technology that help us, you know, broadcast information in so many different ways. But there are limitations on school boards' ability to do that. You know, RSA 91A, you know, imposes very technical requirements on a thing called a meeting. And a meeting occurs if you've got a quorum of your members able to communicate contemporaneously about school board business. So, you know, you can't all jump on the Seabrook community page and start talking about the budget. When a board is communicating, you really have to be, you know, appoint a spokesperson, make sure that the spokesperson is representative of the board. We just had a big issue in a different district where the person on, you know, who had access to the district website, which we don't recommend generally, but, you know, we can just talk about that, but had, you know, had access as, you know, permissions to post things on the website, was not in agreement with the board, and was basically posting things that were contrary to actions the board was taking. Of course, it had to do with reopening, but so in any event, you know, you really, you know, have to, in your communication plan, think through, you know, how you get the information out, but also keeping in mind your responsibilities as a board as a whole and individual board members under the right to know law. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. Well, good point.
Can I ask a question here, and you tell me if it's the wrong place to ask it?
Go ahead,
So
Bill.
Seabrook, like Winnicott with Hampton, and Northampton, who you met with last week, I hope board members would agree with me that Seabrook, in my characterization, that Seabrook has an active social media. Yes, I see some shaking heads. And so I know you said earlier that board members don't give up their rights as individuals, and that's true. The flip side of that is how board members are seen by the public as speaking as board members if they're engaging in that social media. And so, can you just talk a little bit about that issue?
So what we would say is on the community pages, you know, non-school board or non-individual board member pages, there really should be minimal communication. If you have a string of comments, so you have a Facebook post and you have 95 comments, and board member 3, I take it you have 5 board members, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So board member 3, you know, gets out of work and checks into this at you know, 5:30 and posts a comment without realizing that, you know, 10 minutes ago or 20 comments ago, one board member had posted who didn't realize that 10 minutes before that another one did. You're now giving the public perception that you've got a board, you know, debate happening on public media, and 91A requires that when you have a quorum discussing school board business in a manner that they can communicate contemporaneously. It's not whether you contemporaneously communicate. It's whether you're able to. And Facebook comments, you are able to communicate contemporaneously. So you now have a meeting, you didn't post it, there's not a physical location where you can have it, nobody's taking minutes, so you are technically violating the right to know law when that happens. So the board as a whole, if the board wants representative comments, then it should designate somebody to do that. There's one school board up in the western part of the state that actually designated two-person, point, counterpoint. Not like Saturday Night Live. Stay away from the Saturday Night Live. But the other, the other thing you could do is just redirect, because you will see misinformation. You will see, here's what they said last night, those crazy board members, and you're sitting there going, that is absolutely not what was said last night. And the thing to do is redirect them to where the correct information can be found, and then just let the barking dogs bark, because there's not a thing you're going to say that's going to convince somebody on Facebook that, that their craziness is not crazy. So if you're an individual board member that wants to have your own individual, constituents, please talk to me because I'm a board member, which is appropriate. You need to, number one, set some boundaries. We're not going to have, personal complaints here. That's not the avenue for them. We've got some policies that are in that larger packet, KE, KEB. KEB especially is the one for receiving complaints about individuals. You as each board member should be familiar with that policy, because when you do get that communication from an individual, whether it's on Facebook or in the produce aisle or at the recycling center, et cetera, you want to not just say, hey, I can't talk to you about this, that's not my job, go talk to Bill. You want to also say, look up on the board's website for KEB. That will tell you the steps that you need to go through. Hopefully you'll be able to resolve that at the lowest level, but if not, you'll see where you go to next. But anyway, back to the Facebook part. So you need to set some boundaries on your own individual, whatever you call that thing. And in Facebook or Twitter or others, you can pin a disclaimer at the top of it, so that no matter how far somebody scrolls down in your thing, you've got this little explanation at the top. And at that top, you want to say, this is the page of Will Phillips. I'm a board member, but this is my own personal page. I don't represent the school district in this capacity. Anything you say to me is only said to me. It's not considered a communication to the school board. We have, if you're interested in doing that, we do have a sample disclaimer. It's not in these materials. And some board members, they ran on this idea that they're going to be, they're going to reach out to the community and want to hear from the community, but they have to be clear that they have no authority to act on behalf of the board. They can't answer a question on behalf of the board. They can give their own opinion as to what might have happened or not happened or what should happen, but that's it. So your Facebook presence really should be very clearly defined to be your own. Board members, we strongly discourage against participating in the running dialogues. And if you are going to do that, you need to take steps to assure that you don't have a quorum doing that.
And just one other bit to add to that, Ron, I believe I sent you the right to know law handout as well too. There's a whole section on school board member use of social media and the right to know law handout that Rhonda tells me has been included in the materials. So if you have any questions about that, please reference it. And then if you got any follow-up questions about that, reach out to Will.
Will, I do have one short question. Is this the proper time to touch on reply to all when you're getting an email regarding information?
Okay, sure. We are I'm happy to keep talking. I love to talk. It is 6:30. We do have a few more slides, so
let's do questions. If we don't get to the rest of the slides,
okay.
People can read them on their own, and we can come back again if we need to. I'd rather answer whatever questions the board members might have.
Sure. So yeah, because we did touch the major responsibilities of a board. So what I said a couple of minutes ago as to what defines a meeting, 3 things: quorum of a public body. I'll talk about that in a second. Second thing is you're able to communicate contemporaneously. Third thing is you're talking about matters within the jurisdiction of the public body. So first, the public body, the key, big thing to recall here is you might have 2 different public bodies. You probably have several public bodies. You have your school board, but then every subcommittee of the school board, every advisory committee of the school board, not of the administration, but of the school board, those are each public bodies under the right to know law. So you might have less than a quorum of your school board, but you have a quorum of your policy committee. 2 things on that. If you're talking about a policy and you got a quorum of your policy committee, then you're starting down the path of a right to know violation unless you've noticed, et cetera. However, if your policy committee, you're meeting to, you're dealing with these things, but the 2 people who are there start talking about, geez, wouldn't it be nice if we had a nice shiny tuba in the band? That's not a policy thing. You don't have a quorum. You don't have a quorum of the board. So talking about musical expenditures would not be a violation. So but generally, quorum of the board, if it has to do with the schools, it's probably within the jurisdiction of the board. So you know that, but then you've got this little sub issue of committee. So that's prong 1. Prong 2, able to communicate contemporaneously. Basically, you get any type of digital communication, you are able to communicate contemporaneously. And that's true, whether the other guys at work or out fishing or whatever. There are at least 2 Superior Court cases in New Hampshire that have said email is contemporaneous communication. There's another provision of the right to know law that says sequential communication can implicate contemporaneous communication if it's done to sort of circumvent that contemporaneous provision. So that means if I walk over to Caroline's house and I say, Caroline, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing at the meeting. Why don't you go talk to Mike? And then Caroline goes and talks to Mike. We've got 3 board members who have just been involved in a substantive communication sequentially. There's some real weird nuances in there that I'm not going to talk about. Just use that as your guide. And then the third thing, I really already talked about substantive things. So whether you're talking about email or text message or Facebook comments or Twitter, all of those things can implicate the contemporaneous communication provision. And therefore, if you got a quorum and you've got substantive board matters, you're triggering right to know. And when you have, the meeting requirements, when you have the meeting requirement, then you have, you have to post prior notice, you have to take minutes, you have to have a physical space for the public to attend, and a couple of other things. So back to the actual question, I wanted to lay that foundation. The question was reply all. How can you communicate via email? What are appropriate communications via email? So you've got the emails that are just about, the school board chair saying, we've got an important matter that we're going to have a special meeting on. It has to do with discipline of a person, an employee. You might even know the name of the employee because those kinds of things quite frequently are already public. So you even mention the name of the employee, but all you're doing is talking about scheduling that meeting and the mechanics of scheduling that meeting. That would be appropriate. But school board chair sends out that email, and then one of the board members responds, well, this is all preposterous. I know this person is a great person. He's just being railroaded. That's a substantive communication. That's if you hit reply all, and that goes to a quorum of your board members, you've just triggered the meeting provisions of the right to know law. So some just thoughts, and in the right to know document that you have, there are some best practices about emails and so forth that are I think they're near the tail end of that document, but there is an index at the beginning of it. So one thing about addressing, if you're going to send an email to a quorum of the board, which really should only be done for administrative matters, don't put the addresses in either CC or address, put them in BCC. If you put them in BCC, you might note that this was sent to all the board members. But if you put it in BCC and someone hits reply all, it's only going to go to, it's only going to go to the main addressee. Another precaution that you can take is, so I'm sending the email about the teacher needing the hearing, and I put in there at the top, whether it's in the subject heading or right below the salutation, I mean right above it, please do not respond substantively to this email. Any discussion about the substance should only occur in a duly noticed meeting. Don't put that on every email, because if you do, you just become blind to it. You want to put it when you really think you're touching on information that might trigger a conversation. So did I answer the question in 1,000 words, or give or take?
I think in some ways, yes. One of the major ones is that we're getting distribution of information regarding the meeting. And usually buried in the bottom is, are you going to attend? Because it's going out to the members of our committee, whether it's this board or another board, if you do the response, you've got the basics of the meeting, some possible discussions that are embedded in that information. And you just think, well, I'm replying while I'm going to the meeting. Yeah, I'll say yes and reply all. That permissible.
Yes.
If I could, part of the challenge is about figuring out the email question, and I guess all social media is, there needs to, and in some ways there needs to be a distinguishment between what's sort of administrative task versus what is board having a substantive conversation about official school district business. If the board chair sends out an email to all the 4 other board members and includes Bill and Rhonda on it and says, I want to hold an extra meeting. Is everybody available Wednesday night at 6 p.m.? And everybody goes back, yeah, I'm free. No, I'm not free. I can be there at 6:30. But I got to get off the call at 7 o'clock. That's figuring out a meeting. That's ministerial. Likewise, if Bill or Rhonda send out, here's the example I give. Bill sends out, or Rhonda sends out an email to the 5 board members. It says, attached is a copy of the document for your approval at the next board meeting. Please review it and come ready to discuss it at the meeting. That's completely fine. The board isn't engaged in substantive conversation. But if you receive that email from Bill with a draft contract or whatever, and board member number 1 replies back and says, I made some changes to paragraph 2, my version is attached. And the board member number 2 replies back and says, well, I agree with Mike's comments, I added a couple of my own, and replies all. And the board number 3 replies back and says, this is stupid, I'm not voting for this in any circumstance whatsoever. What are you doing? You're engaging in discussion and deliberation and conversation about official school district business. That's a meeting under the law. So to a degree, reply all, and this, and I get how it happened. I get what you're saying, Mike. Like, an initial email, is everybody able to attend the meeting on Tuesday night? Somebody says yes, but somebody says yeah, and oh, by the way, let's bring up this issue, and then that ventures off into another conversation. So you have to be mindful of the nature of the conversation to some degree. What are you talking about? But as Will said, if you BCC the initial conversation, you can avoid some of that.
It's all. I've also found it's helpful, if I can jump in here, if those questions come out, as you said, from Rhonda or me. Right. It's more helpful. And you've noticed, particularly with joint board, I'm sure board members have noticed that I have gone to the BCC with 23 people because there were some things that I was sending out to people, and then people were sending back questions and they were copying the other 23, and it began to look like a discussion. And so I've gone very much to the BCC, particularly with that larger group.
Sure. I saw, did a board member raise their hand or something? Kelly, I believe you had a question or a comment.
Yep. So I just want to mention that I think a lot of this is just communication. I think that maybe some board members are new and may not know exactly if they
Absolutely.
should CC, BCC,
Absolutely.
reply to all. I think it's a little bit of consideration and communicate and say, hey, by the way,
Yep.
the next time you send the email, or, you know, by the way, the reason that you weren't included in the email, maybe for this. I don't think that, you know, certain situations like this need to be brought out into into a forum that we're having now. I think that, you know, a lot of this can be brought out maybe with just a phone call, or, you know, we're all board members and we're all supposed to work together. And just a little bit of communication and consideration goes a long way. So
Absolutely, Kelly. I mean, certainly from my experience, when there's been something that has raised a question of either a superintendent or a board chair about BCC or reply all or Facebook posting, it's certainly not done with any malintent. It's
right.
You know, the nuances. And the other challenging part is the right to know law has not caught up to the digital age and to the technology. A lot of the advice that Will and I, you know, are imparting tonight, attorneys representing school districts and municipalities have had to, I don't want to say piecemeal isn't the right word, but we've had to get creative with how we've sort of taken, you know, because first it was email, right? 15 years ago, it was email. How do we do with email? And then 10 years ago, it was Facebook. How do we deal with Facebook? And tomorrow it'll be, I don't know, is TikTok going away or not? I don't know. But tomorrow it'll be TikTok or something else after that. So, and so we're trying to impart, you know, reasonable advice to board members to keep boards out of trouble, recognizing that this is how people communicate these days, through text message, through email, through whatever the platform might be.
Yeah, I mean, we're a small community. I don't think there's one person on our board that do not run into each other.
Right.
At least once a month, you
That's
know.
right.
Maybe just pulling somebody aside and have enough consideration, or just, you know,
Yep.
say to them, hey, by the way, you know what I mean? I think that goes a long way.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you
You know?
very much. Yeah. Good
You're
points.
welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
So Barrett, I have a question. Whenever
Yeah.
I do, I'm usually the one that's sending the email looking for a quorum for a meeting.
Yeah.
And I generally do, I will send it to everybody. And
Yep.
when I'm trying to schedule something, I kind of like when they do the reply all as far as
Yep.
availability, because I feel that notifies the other board
Correct.
members when we may be missing somebody, when we might not have a quorum. And should I not be doing it that way?
No, I think, I mean, if it's worked for you, that's fine. What is incumbent on the board members and probably presumably to the administrative staff is to not engage in substantive conversation or discussion via email about the nitty-gritty of the board's work. Scheduling meetings, fine. Sending out the agenda, fine. Asking if, you know, sending out an email saying, I'm putting together the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to put on it? That's fine. That's, I mean, you need to be able to function, you know what I mean? But just be mindful, if you send out that email saying, Bill and I and the board chair putting together the agenda, is there anything anybody would like to talk about? For the board members, if they say, I want to talk about, you know, the playground construction project, leave it at that. Don't say, I want to talk about the playground construction project, and then go on for 2 paragraphs about why it's going well or why it's not going well, or why we need more money and why we don't need more money, or why, you know, Bobby got a splinter on the slide the other day and whatever. That conversation about the issue needs to happen at the board meeting. And if there's a question about why that board member wants that on the issue, I'd encourage the superintendent or the board chair to call that school board member and say, hey, you know, Bob, got your email about the playground issue. What specifically are the concerns that you're having with it?
I'd just throw in here that one of the pieces of advice that I give to all boards is, you know, the idea of the right to know law is to preserve the public's right to a transparent government. And if you conduct yourselves with that in mind,
yeah,
you know, you number one won't have, you might have a couple of wackadoodles that think everything's being decided in the back room, but they won't be able to point to real evidence of that. You know, they might ask you for, you know, 10,000 emails, and they might find 8 emails where somebody crossed the line a little bit, but it's such a rarity that even if they drag you to court, the worst thing that's going to happen is the judge is going to get mad at the other guy and say, oh, by the way, you shouldn't, have these discussions. But so just do your best. There's places, as Barrett said, where technology just doesn't match the right to know law or the other way around. And just keep in mind, you've got those three components: substantive conversations, quorum of the board, and able to communicate contemporaneously. And those three things, doesn't matter what form of communication you're engaging in, those are the three things that just keep those in mind and use those to guide your conversations. And substantive communications really means, getting into the whys of something, not here's the topic I want to discuss.
With that, I think we're about at an hour. We may even be a little bit longer. I want to be respectful of the board's time. There would be a lot of slides left to go through. So rather than Will and I stay on here and just go through some more slides, I think it would, if you want to read them on your own, if you want to have us back at some other time to talk about sort of the superintendent's roles, or are there any other questions moving forward on anything that we talked about tonight or anything that we did not talk about tonight? We're here. We're happy to have a conversation with the board, or we can keep going if you want. Totally up to you. I want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Does anyone on the board have a say?
I know you've all been on this call for about 2.5 hours now, two and a half hours, and I guess
It's been a long meeting. I think your suggestion to have us go through the slides and review that and get back to you or Will with questions would be great, because there's a lot to digest and there's some nuances that are in there, and maybe we'll pick up a little more information regarding what we're doing as school board members.
Great. And thanks. I appreciate that. And certainly if you want to read that on your own, and if the board would like to have us back for another 45 minutes or an hour sometime sooner or later, or whenever you'd like, we're happy to do it at the board's pleasure.
Right.
On the last slide, you have the direct contact information for Barrett and I. Probably the best part of my job is talking to individual board members when they have questions about governance or policies. So whenever if you have a question, just feel free to give a call. If you get a voicemail, which during COVID is very likely, that voicemail will get emailed to me, and I will get it right away, and I will return it as quickly as I can.
Great.
You guys are great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, as always. Just if you can indulge me for one more minute, Bill, thank you for arranging this. Rhonda, thank you for doing everything. I know how that works in an office. And more than am I wrong, Bill? Am I wrong? More than anything, to the members of the Seabrook School Board, thank you for your continued membership in NHSBA. Thank you for inviting Will and I to participate. We hope it was helpful, and we hope it was worth your time. If there's any follow-up, by all means, as Will said, reach out to us at any time. And if you'd like to have us back, we're happy to do this again at the board's pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great to see you again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barrett. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So given that, Bill, I think that we're ready to close the meeting.
I think you are, sir.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Give us a second.
Way ahead of me.
Do I have a second?
Sorry,
guess.
I second that. I was on mute.
Thank you. Good. Thanks, Kelly. And I think that just a wave and that'll be a vote. Is that good, Rhonda?
Yeah, I think Jessica's gone though, right?
Yeah, she's gone. Correct.
All right. I will mark
Thank you.
in favor.
Thank you, everyone.
You're not present. Thanks, everybody.
Another great meeting. Thanks. Good night.
Bye.